Here we go. All right. Good morning, folks. So today and for this week, we're going to be focusing on living things and what makes something a living thing. So let me start the presentation. We're going to roll through it real quick. We've got a couple of worksheets this week, but mostly we're going to have a project, our first project of the year, which I'll explain in a separate video. All right. So taking a look in Schoology, you should see we've got our Unit 1 where we still are. And here we have our 928, that's today, through this Friday. So we're into our second week. Now for this, we've got our characteristics of living things slideshow. We have a bit of a reading to help folks keep that straight. And then we've got our two assignments. Number 3, Marty Martian will be our practice for the living things. And then number 4 will be our project. So taking a good look at our characteristics of living things. Now here we're seeing some of our first red terms. Remember, red terms are these super important things that are going to appear over and over and over again. And here we're seeing the terms biotic and abiotic. If you remember from our Latin, bio means life. A biotic is just a living thing. When we put the letter A in front of anything in Latin, it means not. So biotic is a living thing. Abiotic is a non-living thing. You'll see these terms over and over again, and especially once we start getting into ecology. So the basic rule is there are 8 characteristics that a living thing must have. First of all, they must be made of cells. Now, they can be made of one cell that's still made of cells. It's just one instead of more than one. But all living things must be made of cells. There are some living things that I will talk about later on that succeed at basically everything except this stage of being made of cells. So all living things must be made of at least one cell. Number 2, all living things need materials and energy. That means that they have to obtain the materials for the energy that they need. Now, in humans, that means things like eating and drinking. But not all living things, not all biotics, will follow those exact same rules. Plants, for example, you may consider them drinking water with their roots, but they really don't actively ingest or eat anything. But they must have some way to get their materials and energy. All living things must grow and develop in some way. On the left here, you see a plant growing. And throughout that plant's life, it's really not going to change a whole lot. It's just going to kind of get bigger with some more leaves. That's a pretty simple growth and development, but it still qualifies. On the right, you're seeing the metamorphosis of a monarch caterpillar from its caterpillar to butterfly adult form. And that is unbelievably complex as they spin themselves into a cocoon, literally liquefy, and then rebuild back into their adult shape. Some form of growth and development must take place. All living things must be composed or based on DNA. They have to have some form of what we have found to be the universal genetic code. So, pretty straightforward. All living things reproduce. Now, this is an important one because this doesn't mean an individual needs to reproduce. All it means is that these species must be able to reproduce. So, for example, in a wolf pack, which is the picture you're seeing here, only the alpha, which is the male lead, and the beta, the female lead, only those two mate. All other members of that wolf pack do not get a chance to reproduce unless they can become the alpha or the beta. The entire wolf pack works together to provide the food, the materials for the puppies that the alpha and the beta produce. It evolutionarily tries to guarantee that the most fit, the best two of the pack, produce puppies that should be a mixture of their traits, and therefore even better yet. And then the pack, the less dominant members, can help to make sure those puppies become adults and continue the pack. So you as an individual do not need to reproduce in your lifetime. We as a species must be able to reproduce. Now, this is going to bring up two more terms that we are going to start to see all over the place. I decided to put them in yellow instead of red because we'll be repeating them, but that is sexual reproduction versus asexual reproduction. And I included a little image for each of these. So, sexual reproduction is what humans are most familiar with because we are a sexually reproducing species. We have two parents, we mix genes, and we produce unique offspring. Asexual reproduction is basically, for the most part, done by single-celled organisms where instead of mixing genes at all they do is they just split in half. And so the new one has a copy of the genes the parent had. It's cloning. Now, there's positives and negatives to each of these, but they are the two strategies that we've really found for reproduction in nature. Number 6, all living things must respond to their environment. Our poor, fleshy, soft, squishy selves, we respond. When it gets cold, we put on more layers. When it gets hot, we take off more layers, I guess, and we sweat and things like that. That's all responding to the environment. Now, when you take a look at something like the tree, like we're starting to see outside now, that's responding to the environment too. Those trees are responding to the changing temperatures to shed their leaves. So response to environment doesn't have to be a very direct and immediate thing. It can be a slower series of steps. It doesn't have to happen or work at the speed that we think of. Number 7, all living things must maintain a balanced internal environment, and we call this homeostasis. Now, interestingly, all heat, all energy in the universe is slowly spreading out with the goal, as far as the universe is concerned, to get everything to zero. That's called the heat death of the universe. And that is where everything will go eventually. Eventually, it will reach that point. But in the meantime, we will take in food and materials, use that energy to maintain our energy, our structure, and our balance. When we die, it's because we lose the ability to maintain that structure and balance. And finally, number 8. All living things must evolve. They must experience evolution. So that means that they must change over time. Now here you see a map, and this was actually tracking coronavirus. And what you see here are the different variations that we've seen, the different mutant strains that have already evolved in just the last 8 months since this whole pandemic began. So they are evolving, they are changing, which brings up something very interesting. Viruses, are they living or not? How many of these characteristics of life do they meet? And how many of them do they fail at? Are there any of them that they fail at? Are they considered a living thing? And I'm going to leave you with that. I want you to find the answer to this. Here is the parent list. So here are all 8 characteristics of life lined up. And if you need to write them down, you can just pause the video and do so. Made of cells, needs materials and energy, has to grow and develop, has DNA, reproduces, responds to the environment, maintains homeostasis, and evolves or changes over time. Those are the 8. A living thing must have all 8. So pretty straightforward, but this is going to be what we focus on and what we work with the most over the course of this week. So I hope that helps, clarifies everything for people, and I'll see you soon.